Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the solved murder of Judith Barsi and her mother Maria Barsi. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect whatsoever to anyone I'm going to talk about. I've just gathered the information off the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. Intro. Judith, if any of you don't actually know, she was a rising 10-year-old Hollywood star. She was in a few films, and some of them you might actually recognise. Some of them you might not know that she was actually in them, because she did it was an animated film and she did the voiceover for it, but they were highly known films. Judith Edith Barsi was born on the 6th of June in 1978 to parents Joseph and Maria in Los Angeles. Her parents were actually immigrants from Hungary. Now, they didn't actually meet in Hungary and then emigrate together. They emigrated separately, and they actually met in a restaurant in Los Angeles where Maria worked. Joseph would come into the bar and he would pay for his drinks with $100 bills. And Maria was single, she was looking to start a family, and she was attracted to him. And he was also attracted to her. They have both been divorced previously and they began dating. They fell in love and got married in 1977. And that was when Maria realised she was pregnant. Kind of a bit of a surprise. They weren't really expecting it. They settled in Los Angeles where they went to have Judith. Now, what Maria didn't know was that Joseph had a history, a kind of a dark past, that he had reinvented himself, and she never knew about it until later on. So they had Judith, and she was their pride and joy. She was their only child together. He had other children from, like I said, the previous marriage, but Judith was their only child together. And Joseph would go out and work, and he would want Maria to be like a stay-at-home mum, which she was fine with. She absolutely adored it, and she loved sort of being just at home with a daughter. And so they were both happy with the arrangement. Judith was really well known as this kind-hearted little sweet-natured girl, and she was described as having the manners of an angel. She loved playing with a doll, she loved playing outside in the sun, she just absolutely loved life. Now, Maria had always wanted to be this actress when she was younger, or just generally famous really. She just kind of loved the idea of all of that, and she sort of started encouraging Judith to develop these skills to become a child actress. When she reached the age of 5, her mother began singing lessons. She began sort of pronunciation lessons to make sure that she could pronunciate her words properly. She began dancing lessons, and by all accounts Judith absolutely loved it. So it wasn't one of them things where it was forced upon her and it was not something that she wanted to do. It really was something that she really wanted to do. They both enjoyed doing this together, and she was really good at it. She had this natural talent, and her mother saw it in her and sort of helped her in the right direction, and she was really good. So this hobby they enjoyed doing together, people around her would say that it was highly unlikely that Judith would ever get anywhere, and it didn't really matter to her, because yes, okay, trying to get into acting and things like that can be very difficult, and to try and be spotted, it can be really hard, but it was a hobby to them and it didn't really matter because they both enjoyed it anyway. And like I said, she thought her daughter had something really special, so they just continued with their training and just enjoying what they were doing. And she was right to as well, because Judith did become a little child actress. A big break happened when the family were out on this ice skating ring, and there was actually a commercial being shot there, and one of the directors spotted Judith and realised that she would be perfect for a different commercial that they were going to shoot that he was also casting for. They approached her parents, spoke to them, and that was it. She literally got an agent within a few days, and she was on a road to having a career being a little child actress. She got the role for that commercial. It was actually Donald Duck orange juice, and she did a fantastic job on it. They kept bringing her back for the same commercial. It was as if they'd found the face of sort of the orange juice, and obviously they kept using her for that.
Ever since Mom and Dad found out that Donald Duck is 100% pure orange juice, oh, please. We don't know what to do with them anymore.
Now, these commercials really did open up all these doors to Judith. It really started off her acting career. She would eventually appear in around 70 TV commercials, along with numerous film and TV appearances too. Judith was really enjoying her job, and her mother was enjoying helping her along the way to enable her to continue with this career path. As I said before, Maria had always wanted to become an actress or something along those lines, but then she met Joseph, she had a child. She kind of hung up that dream, so she was delighted when she was able to help her daughter to do the same and to become so successful. Judith was absolutely doing brilliant for herself. By the age of just 7, she was earning $100,000 a year, which is insane. A little girl of 7 years old was earning that much money. Wow. And because of her success, it enabled the family to move from this tiny little apartment that they were staying in into this lovely 3-bedroomed house in Los Angeles in this really nice suburb. It was very quiet and sort of very crime-free and things like that, and it was just a lovely area. As I said before, Joseph had a dark past which he was hiding from everyone. As soon as they moved into this house, he erected up this tall spiked fence all the way around his property, and people did think it was odd because it was a lovely area and there wasn't really a need for fences. Nobody had them, and literally he was the first one to put them up, so people did find that strange straight away. The area was very safe and nobody really thought that there was a need for something kind of so drastic, but each to their own. He built a fence anyway and they enjoyed their new home. Now Judith was very small for her age, but in the sense of Hollywood, that's actually a really good thing because she was older but she could play much younger roles. So say, I don't know, say she's 6 years old or 7 and she was small enough to play a little 3-year-old girl. That is so much better for the company to hire her, who's more experienced and has got more practice in and understands it more, knows a little bit more about what's going on, than hiring somebody who's actually 3 years old. It's a lot more difficult to work with somebody at the age of 3 than it would be to work with somebody at the age of 6 or 7. So in Hollywood's eyes, that was really, really good for Judith's career too. She did actually have hormone injections at one point or another to try and make her sort of grow a little bit, but she never did. They didn't work and she just stayed really, really small. Her agent Ruth said by the age of 10, she was playing roles of 6, 7, 8-year-olds. Her first actual TV role was in a TV series called Fatal Vision, which she would follow up with a lot more roles such as Twilight Zone, Punky Brewster, Cagney and Lacey. There are quite a few more. I will put up a list of them. I'm not going to say them all, but they're there for you to look at if you wish to. Needless to say, she did really well, and because, as I said, she was really small, they wanted her for roles such as the role she got in Jaws the Revenge.
Where's the lady who brings the soda? They had them on the big plane.
There's some coffee in the thermos.
I'm too young for coffee.
Oh.
Can I drive?
She was actually really well known for this role, along with 2 others that she did. They were animated and she voiced over in them, so obviously you can't see her in them, but her voice is there and she did play a role in them. There was The Land Before Time, where she voiced the character of Ducky.
What is your name? Maybe you cannot talk yet, huh?
As I said before, you may not have even known that she starred in these because, like I said, she's just not pictured in them, but she did. She played these characters and they're really well-known films. I've watched this film myself. I loved it. It was brilliant at the time. Such a classic film, and the premises behind it and things like that was just really, really good. And personally, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know that Judith was in it either. But as soon as I heard the character Ducky and heard her voice, I knew it was her straight away. She was also in a film called All Dogs Go to Heaven. Again, an absolute classic, a film that personally I loved myself. She voiced a girl called Anne-Marie.
Will I ever see you again?
Sure. Sure you will, kid. You know, goodbyes aren't forever.
Then, goodbye, Charlie. I love you.
Judith was a really friendly little girl. When she moved to the new house, she actually made friends with the neighbour, and they would often be seen outside in the swimming costume, running around in the sprinklers, absolutely having a blast. And she was, by all accounts, just this happy little girl who just adored her family. She also went to public school, so they didn't try and put her in private school. They didn't, even though she was earning all this money, and they could have done. They wanted a balanced lifestyle for her, so they put her in public school. The problem was that as Judith's fame began to increase and she began to earn more and more money, her father began to get more and more bitter about her success. She was around about 6 or 7 and she was earning much more money than her father had ever been able to earn. And it's just so sad because she was his daughter. Your parents normally want you to do well for yourself. You don't get jealous of your daughter earning more money than you. Well, maybe you do a little bit, but not to the extremes that he took it. Never in a million years. You just be happy for him, and it's just so sad what actually happened. He started to be mean to his daughter, which she was such a sweet little girl, and this man was being mean to her, and just because she was earning more money than him, it's so wrong. It's just disgusting. The neighbours reported on one occasion that Judith was out playing in the garden, she was being loud, she was playing with a kite, just like kids would normally do. And her father came stomping out. He grabbed hold of the kite, and Judith began crying, saying, obviously, please don't break it. He turned to Maria and he said, look, she's a spoilt brat, she doesn't share her toys. And then he proceeds to break the kite into pieces right in front of her. And that's just awful. He also began to drink and abuse alcohol. He had previously done that, but not normally with kind of Maria. As I said, he had a dark past, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But when he was drunk, he would be very angry and he would often lash out at Maria. His abuse with alcohol also got him on the wrong side of the law a few times. He actually got arrested 3 times for drunk driving, but even that didn't seem to really put him off drinking. He'd come home from bars absolutely wasted and just take out his frustrations on his innocent family that were just at home doing nothing wrong. He would come home, he'd be so angry, and he would just abuse them and things like that. This was the first time that Maria had seen him like this before. Then in December of 1986, Maria actually reported her husband to the police for abuse and for the threatening behaviour that he was showing towards her. When the police arrived though, they didn't see any evidence of physical abuse, and as soon as they got there, she just dropped the charges against Joseph. After this, Joseph did stop drinking. I guess in his eyes he'd been sort of in too many run-ins with the law, and so he did stop. But the abuse that Judith and Maria would receive didn't stop. He didn't stop being violent towards them. He became really controlling, so any mail or anything that Maria would receive, he would open it. And on one occasion, he opened a letter that was inviting Maria to a funeral in Hungary. One of her family members had passed away, and he hid it. He thought that she would obviously want to go to this funeral. She would take Judith, but in his eyes, she wouldn't come back. And that was her chance to escape this marriage, so he hid it away from her so that she just couldn't go. A little bit into his background, his first wife was called Clara, and she did actually leave him after his violence and abuse really started to escalate. As I said, when he got drunk, he got angry. He was becoming more violent to her and the children, and she would eventually move away and take the kids with her because he would beat her and he would just be so violent towards them, and he was just this horrible man. I believe he even began throwing things at her and things like that when he tried to get her back and she wouldn't. And so that's when he went to Los Angeles to reinvent himself. That's where he met Maria. Of course, Maria didn't have a clue about any of this. He just never told her, like you wouldn't. Maybe if she knew, she would have been more inclined to stay away from him. But then again, the heart wants what the heart wants at the time, and you just can't really speculate on that. The abuse began to escalate. Even Judith was starting to tell people, like her friends and things, she'd tell them that her father was throwing pans and pots around. On one occasion, it caused Judith's nose to bleed. And Judith, it was really affecting her. She began pulling out her own eyelashes. She began gaining weight. And she even started pulling out her cat's whiskers, which just completely breaks my heart. And Joseph was honest about his actions, brutally honest, to the point where he would actually say to his friends that he was going to kill them. And of course, at the time, you never think it's going to happen. You always think it's just empty words. You never ever think that someone's going to murder their own family. You just think that they're just saying it, even though it's a pretty strange thing to say, admittedly, but he'd never do it, right? On one occasion, Joseph actually took Maria to all of these filled up gas cans, and he said to her, if you ever leave me, I'm going to burn the house down with all 3 of us in. Kind of scaring her into staying with him. He was that petrified of losing him that he would resort to these tactics to try and make her stay. As you can see, it was getting so bad. One day in 1987, Judith was excitedly packing her things. She was going to the set of Jaws of Revenge, which was actually filmed in the Bahamas. So she's in a room packing a suitcase, all really excited. They were going to be gone for a while. Obviously, filming takes a while. Children especially are only allowed to film for a certain amount of time per day. So they can only get, I don't know how many hours it is specifically, but say it's 4 hours because it's work. A child at the age of 6, it is work for them. So they're only allowed to go there for so long. So they're going to be there for a while because especially children can only film for a certain amount of time. So she's packing her things. She's super excited and her father storms in and he was really, really angry once more. He takes a knife and he puts it to his 9-year-old little girl's throat. And he says, if you and your mum don't come home after this film, I'm gonna cut your throat. And then he just left the room. He obviously knew Maria might try and leave, and so he threatened their daughter. It was really taking its toll on Judith. In May of 1988, she actually broke down in front of her agent, who was called Ruth Hansen. She was crying her eyes out. It was completely unlike Judith. She was always this happy-go-lucky little girl who always enjoyed herself. And now she was just sort of crying uncontrollably. She'd gone on loads of auditions in the past, so it wasn't like fear or nerves or anything like that. It was just so out of character for her. She referred her to a child psychiatrist, and just after one visit with this psychiatrist, they realised that she was suffering from abuse at home, physically and emotionally, and they contacted Child Protective Services because of it. The Child Protective Services went on to contact Maria. Now, Maria obviously had been suffering at the hands of Joseph for a while. She had actually gone out and got herself this apartment, and she began moving there slowly, packing tiny little bits of things, planning to leave him eventually. And that's what she told Child Services. She said that she was gonna she had this apartment, she was gonna move there, she was gonna divorce Joseph. And after hearing this information, the Child Services, who were understaffed and overworked presumably, just simply dropped the case, which obviously should not have happened, but unfortunately it did. So Judith and her mother would pretend to go to auditions and things like that all the time, and instead they were going to this apartment that she had in Panorama City, and it would just kind of be a break from Joseph. It would allow them both to have a break from this brutal man who was just abusing them all the time. As I said, Maria has already began packing up little bits of things so that they wouldn't be noticed, so things that Joseph wouldn't notice. But actually, on one occasion, he did actually follow her to this apartment. It was on the 10th of July in 1988, and she'd put some boxes into a car and drove to this apartment, and like I said, he followed her. So when she got out, she began removing the boxes. He jumped out and said, what on earth's going on? What are these boxes? And she did think fast. She said that they were her friends and she was helping her move, and he believed her, at least it seemed like, and they both went home. But that kind of foiled a plan, because now Joseph knew where this apartment was. If she ever escapes, if she did manage to get away from him, she couldn't go there because that would be one of the first places that he would go, being obviously very suspicious of it. I do believe he never found out that the apartment was hers, but she was just really worried about going there because of that fact. Maria's family and friends continued to urge her to leave him, to just go to that apartment anyway, to go and get another apartment, literally just anything just to get out from under him. But it was at this point that she was kind of having second thoughts about it. If she divorced Joseph, he would get to keep the house. He would get to keep a lot of the contents in it that their daughter, that her career had made for them, and he was this abusive man, and she didn't want him to have it. She wanted this house. Now, I don't want to speak ill of Maria at all, and I can, in a sense, understand her wanting this house. She didn't want this violent, abusive man to have this big 3-bedroom house that the daughter had earned when all he did was torment her and was awful to her. But at the same time, he was threatening her life and her daughter's life. Property and mediocre things like that really don't matter when lives are on the line, especially your daughter's life. At the same time, it's easy for me to say that now, sat here. Maybe she truly never thought he would actually act on these threats, and if she really did suspect that he would be capable of something like that, maybe she would have just left. Of course, I'm not blaming Maria in any way whatsoever for the actions which did actually follow which I will be talking about in a little bit. It was never ever her fault. It was all Joseph's, but it's just the circumstances surrounding it are just tragic. At this point, Judith was spending a lot of time at a friend's house. She would obviously go ride a bike over there, and she would spend hours and hours there. And they would let her because they were aware of the home life situation. And it would just give her a break. On one occasion, she actually said to them she didn't want to go home because Daddy always threatens to kill Mummy. And yes, okay, they were concerned about that. But again, they just thought that they were empty words. That it was an empty threat that would never ever get sort of acted on. Just like everybody else thought. Judith's final acting role was in the film All Dogs Go to Heaven. On the 6th of June in 1998, Judith turns 10. They have this little house party and she really enjoys her 10th birthday. On the 25th of July in 1998, the neighbours see Judith outside. She's riding around on this pink bike in the sun, absolutely enjoying herself and loving it. That night, Maria puts Judith to bed and then she goes to bed herself, leaving Joseph downstairs watching TV or something like that, whatever he's doing down there. It was a normal night, or so they thought. However, Joseph had other plans, more sinister, murderous, horrible plans, and he waited for them to go to sleep that night. He goes into his closet where he keeps his guns and he pulls out a .32 caliber pistol. He then sets off to Judith's room. Judith was peacefully asleep in her bed when her father creeps in and, holding the gun to her head, he shoots her, killing her in her sleep instantly. The shot woke up Maria. She ran out of the room, absolutely frantic, terrified. She knew what that noise was. So she's coming out of her room and she gets to the hallway, which is where she meets Joseph. There's a bit of a struggle. I presume that she was just trying to get to her daughter to see what had happened, whether she was okay. So she's probably trying to push past him and he's probably trying to push her back. Anyway, in the end, she ends up on the floor and he shoots her in the head too, killing her instantly. For the next 2 days, Joseph carried on his life like normal, living in that house. He didn't even move the bodies. The bodies were still exactly where he had murdered them, and he just carried on like nothing had happened. The next morning, Judith was supposed to attend this recording session for the film All Dogs Go to Heaven. When she didn't turn up, they called her agent. Her agent then called the Barsi household, and Joseph answered. He said that this black car had picked them both up, they'd got in, and he didn't know where they'd gone. He'd actually moved out at this point. He wasn't living in the house. He'd just come back to say goodbye to his baby girl, which is just horrible. He's literally murdered her in her own bed. His wife's up there and he's pretending that he's this loving, doting father. It was on Wednesday the 27th of July when a neighbour outside called Eunice was tending to her garden and she heard this shot from the Barsi household. She rang the police, told them obviously what had gone on, and then when she hung up the phone, she looked over to the house and it was on fire. I mean, Eunice was quite an elderly woman, but she really tried her best. She got a hose and she's trying to sort of put out the fire, or at least try and calm it as much as she could. The fire services got there. They eventually put out the fire, and when they went inside, they found 3 bodies. They found the body of Judith, aged 10, Maria, aged 48, and Joseph, aged 55. From the crime scene, it was established pretty much straight away that gasoline had been used, so it had been poured over the bodies and over the house, and that the shot that the neighbour heard wasn't an explosion at all. It was actually a gunshot. That was a gunshot where Joseph had killed himself with the same gun that he'd used to kill his daughter and his wife. So obviously he had poured gasoline over the bodies, over the house, and then he shot himself. The news broke the next day of this little rising child actress who had been murdered by her own father. Although her name wasn't sort of super famous yet, the films that she were in were really famous, and so it was really big news over everywhere. The sad aspect of this was Maria and Judith were buried, but they were buried in an unmarked grave, and they didn't actually have a headstone for 16 years. And that's just even more tragic. Like, what happened to them was awful and tragic anyway, but even in death, they didn't even get the dignity of having a headstone, which is just sad. But fans of Judith in 2004 and true crimers and things like that all did this crowdfunding page where they gathered enough money to get Judith and Maria headstones, which is really nice thing to do. So after 16 years of not having one, they finally did. Her last starring role, as I said, was in All Dogs Go to Heaven, which sadly she never got to see how it turned out. Now the credit song in the film is actually named Love Survives, and it's just a little fact about the film, if in case anybody didn't know. It is dedicated to Judith's memory, which again is a really, really sweet thing to do. But it's also really sad. This case was just horrendous. Judith was this bright, beautiful, upcoming little star with such a promising career ahead of her, and it's just awful what happened to her and her mother. Maria told so many people about the abuse. Child services were involved. She was going to leave and then he followed her to the apartment. All of these sort of unfortunate circumstances. Her deciding that, actually, I don't want this horrible man to have this house. And her not leaving him in the end proved to be fatal, unfortunately, which is just horrific. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have any suggestions you'd like me to look into, let me know and I'll look into them for you. Give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this content, this video, anything similar to this. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Judith Barsi. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.